I possibly could have seen a mermaid when I was younger, in my early years of high school. My family vacationed in California at an older waterside cabin house, and it was nearing the end of the evening. The sun was still up a bit and cast a very pretty light over the water, but it wasn't long before it would be completely dark either. My girlfriend at the time was invited, since we were pretty inseparable at the time, just typical teenage years, and we had wanted to do some nighttime swimming and just wanted to have a romantic moonlit picnic on the beach. So we headed down to the water and set things up. And us being hormonal teens, we decided to be risky and go skinny dipping. My partner was more hesitant because the water was pretty cold, but I dove in and ended up swimming over to this decently sized rock that just jutted out and stuck out of the water before climbing on top of it. It was flat top mostly, so you could perfectly lay or sit on top of it and be a good few feet above the waterline. I turned around and began shouting to my partner, who was still on the shore, barely sticking her toes into the water, and she was trying to get her to swim out to the rock with me. It was a good ways into the water, deep, but not too deep, if that makes sense. I decided to climb on top of it and be a silly teen girl and attempted some seductive, albeit awkward, moonlight dancing to entice her. When I glanced towards another rock that just jutted outwards and saw what had appeared to be a humanoid figure quickly slip off into the water. Me, just assuming it was waves, shrugged and just laid down and waited for my partner to swim over. After some more coaxing and teasing, she got in and swam over with some drinks that we'd snuck from my parents' mini fridge and sat down drinking them while cuddling together and pausing every so often to kiss or tease each other. After we finished the drinks, we made out for a few minutes before my partner felt something yank on her leg, which was dangling over the side of the rock and near the water. I peeked over the edge and didn't see much of anything. However, a few strands of seaweed and other water-based plants were clung to her leg, so we just assumed it was that. We resumed our making out for a while, before this time I felt something yank hard on my leg. Like, it practically felt like something had tried to pull me off the rock and into the water. I reacted fast enough and saw what looked like a slimy, smooth, human-like hand slip back into the water, in the shape of something humanoid, but with what looked like a scaly or glittery tail in the moonlight. I freaked out and told my girlfriend that I had seen something weird swim away, and we both freaked out but didn't feel completely safe just to jump back into the water. Plus, we were both naked, so it just made that vulnerability feeling worse. Thankfully, we had been out for a while, and my parents had gotten worried about me, so my dad came down and checked on us shortly after this happened. And he ended up grabbing the paddle boat back to the house and came up to pick us up. We explained that our bathing suit had came undone and gotten swept out to sea. I doubt he believed it, but he seemed to have stopped questioning us. We grabbed our towels and basket and got back to the shore, and as I looked back out towards the rock, I swear to this day that I had seen a pale, human-like face with hair staring at us from the side of the rock before vanishing beneath the waves again. I was on a ferry for a school softball trip off Kodiak Island in 2014. I was 18. A whole bunch of us had snuck up to the old deck around 11 p.m. to watch the waves and smoke cigarettes and weed and generally be teenagers on a boat without supervision. It was 11 p.m. in May in Alaska, so the sun was thinking about setting, but it was still very bright outside. So we're just doing our thing, and we notice a pod of orcas swimming with the ferry's wake, which is very cool but not unusual. If you're familiar with the dimensions of an orca fin, you know that they're about 4 to 6 feet in height and look like big black spikes coming out of the water. They travel and hunt in pods of anywhere between 15 to 40 whales, apex predators, the beautiful demon murderers of the sea. Top of the food chain. So we saw a pod of orcas, counted them to be around 10 to 15, with some babies scattered in there. Very fun to watch. Took them about a good 30 minutes to all go by. We tried to get pictures, but it was just dark enough that our rubbish phone cameras weren't much good. Another 30 or 40 minutes go by, and we've all pretty much sobered up, and it's about time to get dark, and we're cold and sleepy and about ready to go in. No more orcas, haven't seen one for about half an hour. And then one of my girlfriends spots another one, so we all turn and look, but one dorsal fin is immediately followed by another, and another, and another, and then two more, and then two more after that, in two separate rows. And they're taller by a lot, and jagged, like some have whole chunks torn out of them, and they're all 8 to 10 feet high. And they're all attached to one creature. And we can just barely see its back slicing through the water, covered in these rows of spikes, and it just keeps coming. This thing is like 20 or 30 feet from the ferry, running parallel to it, and we are all transfixed. There's like 9 or 10 of us, and no one is saying a word, because we've all turned to look at a whale, and what we're all looking at now is something that's horrifically, terrifyingly, obviously not a whale. Someone tried to take a picture, but it's too dark at this point, and the only reason we can see this thing is the light cast from the ferry portholes. It's a tale as old as time when it comes to things that you really wish you had a picture of, I know. But we all stand there completely scared stiff and in just complete awe, and we watch this thing just keep surfacing for a good 6 or 7 minutes, which means that whatever this thing was, it was long. We are talking 60 or 70 feet long, or even longer, and covered in enormous spikes. Spikes that looked like they'd won thousands of battles with God knows what. It took what felt like an eternity for any of us to say anything after the last of it disappeared back into the strait. I mean, if you look at 8 of your friends just had all seen something that all science had definitely pointed to not existing, and you had all seen the same exact thing, and it was very obviously trailing and hunting not one but like 15 apex predators, what do you even say to break that silence? That's the thing that eats me about the whole thing, is it was hunting. It was following them. It was literally hunting about 60 tons of toothy, angry, intelligent apex predator. Every once in a while, one of us will bring it up and another one will check in like, oh, do you remember this? Were we hallucinating? Did we all see the same insane, worldview melting, terrifying thing that night? And the reason I know we did this is because none of us talked about it after that. Not during the trip, not after, not to any of our friends, because how do you even tell someone about something like that? Now we have almost 10 years between us and that night, so I assume some of them have probably told people. I know I tell people, because I've seen a lot of things like that in Alaska, and I am that crazy to do. And also because there's a very rich history among native Alaskans of something that lives and hunts in the waters around Kodiak. And it's important to tell its story because someday it's going to eat a little too much plastic and no one will ever watch it hunt a pod of orcas from a boat ever again. This happened a few years ago. I was driving through East Pennsylvania, and I'm giving this girl I had just met at a friend's house that night a ride back to her place. Now, getting to her house involves going down a one-lane road that I had driven on at least 100 times prior to this. At one section, the road meanders around a ridge by making a big right turn. Then it does a sharp turn left after a couple of 100 yards. and then right again where these two logs laying on the side of the road make kind of an X shape on the ground. Very distinctive landmark, at least for me. This is the way this road has always been. So there we are, trying to find topics to talk about to keep the car ride from becoming awkward since we hardly know each other. We take a right turn around the bend, then a sharp left turn, and then there's a left turn up ahead. Immediately my body goes into fight or flight mode. I remember thinking, this isn't right. I know that there's a right turn here. This is not what's supposed to be here. We both fell dead silent and just looked ahead in confusion. The road about 100 yards in front of me just turned left and disappeared off into the woods. To the right there was nothing, just the side of a hill and some trees. It looked completely natural, not like a mirage or anything, yet it felt so strange and almost intentionally deceptive. None of this made sense. I knew these roads. As we approached the turn, I decided that I'm not going to go down that road. Something bad was down that road. So I just made the irrational decision to turn right instead and hope for the best. The girl in the car put her hands on the dashboard to brace for impact. My eyes were still fixated down the left turning road as I started steering to my right. And then, as my gaze shifted towards that direction I was now driving in, suddenly I could see the correct road in front of me again. Everything was back to normal. I looked in the rear view mirror and sure enough, the left turning road was non-existent. My hands felt icy cold and I was physically shaking. I pulled over to my right and just sat there in silence. We contemplated going back to investigate, but just looking at the road behind me gave me a sick feeling in my stomach, and she felt it too. We decided to get the hell out of there, and that was that. I was very hesitant to go down that road again and avoided it the best I could after that. But a few weeks or months later, I did decide to go back in the daytime and check it out. I pulled over at the right turn spot, got out of my car and walked around the area. This is the part that really freaks me out. I quickly found out that on the left side of the road, obscured by some thick underbrush, was a very steep, rocky cliff that dropped off maybe 200 or 250 feet into a ravine. That phantom road would have taken me directly through a clearing in between two trees that lead straight over the edge of the cliff. If I had chosen not to follow my gut and drove down that road, there's a very, very good chance that we would have been seriously injured or killed. Apparently several people have crashed in that area by driving down into the ravine. It might just be a coincidence, but who knows? I don't know what to make of this event. If we were alone, I'd be more willing to write it off as a hallucination or a trick of the eye. But I wasn't alone. She saw the same thing I did. I wasn't intoxicated, although my passenger was a bit buzzed if I remember correctly. I've also never experienced anything out of the ordinary in my entire life other than this. I wanted to share my experience. That still freaks me out just thinking about it. Just down the road from where a few years ago I had previously lived in southeast Australia is the opening into about 100 acres of woodlands and bush that I frequently went into when I was younger to do the usual things, riding and camping, etc. I was out driving at around 11:30 p.m. with my girlfriend, and as we were in the area decided to show her the woodlands while we were in the area. She loves everything to do with nature, and it was summer, so an extremely warm night. I left my car with the light shining into the trees as we weren't going too far in, and it was pitch black inside, and the two of us just kind of sat chatting, having a smoke and generally relaxing. She was sitting on a sort of map of the area that had been put in on some plastic, and I was keeping an eye on the trees as I had a feeling that something was just wrong. I've seen before a few people that have said They felt like they were in danger, although nothing around them was off. And it was this same feeling in your gut. Every sense was almost reaching out, and my adrenaline was up, but there wasn't really anything in my outline that seemed any different. After lighting another cigarette to calm my nerves, I scanned the tree line again and realised that it looked different to before. It was only after staring into the dark that I saw that there was moonlight now lighting up grass where it couldn't before, as there was a black shape blocking it that before I thought was a tree. I've got goosebumps now just thinking about this, but the only way to describe it was that all sound just ceased and everything went dead silent, and a few seconds later this disgusting feeling of dread fell over me, and I saw motion in the dark of the path as this thing crawled towards us on all fours. I mean, I've seen nearly every animal in the outback here, and we don't have any large predators like in the US or Europe, but somehow I knew this thing was a predator, and it wasn't hiding itself from us, but just slowly crawling forward towards us. I don't know if my girlfriend saw it at night or as I couldn't look away, but just as it reached the line of my car lights were able to illuminate, it reared up onto two legs and just sat staring at us. I mean, I am 6'4" and this thing was about another metre larger than me, with arms that were far too long, that reached down near to the ground, and all I could make out was an off-white, almost yellowish fur on it. And in the dim light, I could make out the silhouette of its head as like a dog or a wolf. I wasn't able to move as it stared at me, but it was at this point that my girlfriend gasped, which seemed to break me out of whatever trance was stopping me from thinking logically. I grabbed her by the arm and sprinted to my car, slammed the doors and tore out of there as fast as I could. Both of us just too scared to speak until about half an hour later. We'd both discussed it many times, and the feeling that we had was what I imagine a rabbit sees when it catches a wolf or a fox looking at it. That this is something that would be able to end us with absolute ease if it so choose. Neither of us have been able to come up with any explanation for what it was, but it has definitely changed the way that I view the woods and the bush, and when I go camping or hiking now, I think back to what that was, and I wonder if I will ever see anything like it again. This happened about 2 years ago in the summer, shortly after the 4th of July at Klingman's Dome. You guys can Google it, but it's the highest peak in the Great Smokies. My husband had been hounding for everyone to go there, myself and two sons aged 6 and 8 at the time. We were not going to stay overnight, just go and check out the summit viewing deck. Again, you can Google this if needed. Now, for those that have never been there, the viewing deck has 2, maybe more ways that you can get to it. The most common way, and the way that we took, was to drive in, park the car, then take about a mile hike to the deck. It's super easy, and also super busy depending on the time of year, and it's also paved. So we go, get up there and take some really amazing photos and hang out for a little bit. Now here's where, in hindsight, things started to get weird. My youngest child has epilepsy and a migraine disorder, has been seizure-free for 2.5 years, and headaches controlled by medication. Now, as we are going back, he started to complain that he feels really hot and his head hurts. On the dome, it's very cold because of the high altitude, so we were all needing long sleeves, and it felt more like November instead of summer. I tell my husband and other child I'm going to carry him the rest of the way, and me being the out-of-shape person I am, would meet them at the car if I got behind or had to take it slow, which I was sure I would from carrying a 50 pounds of child. I didn't want to ruin their fun day and figured I would sit in the car with the AC blowing and the little one and give him some migraine rescue medication, and that while we rested, my husband and son could finish exploring. I made a half-arsed joke about sending the rangers in to find us if I didn't make it back to the car shortly after they did, because I am in really bad shape and may need to be golf carted out. They went ahead, but we're still in sight. Maybe a few 100 feet, I'm not too sure. At this point, maybe it was a lull in the visitor levels, but there was no other people I could see in front of us or coming down behind us. My little one starts to cry and say that both his ears and his head hurt now too, and he was covering his ears. At this point, the weight of him was breaking my arms off, so I put him down and I told him that we were going to sit down and rest for a few minutes. So we walked off the paved trail and sat down at the edge of the tree line, and I told him to close his eyes and just relax and lay down on the cool grass beside me. We were almost to the car now, so I got my phone out to text my husband that we were resting, and I noticed that it was silent because my text clicks sounded so loud. There was no wind, not a thing. It was like someone pressed pause on the whole area, or that the forest was holding its breath. That would be another way to describe it. My mother is a paranoid whack job about tornadoes. She grew up in Illinois, and she spent years pounding it into my head as a child that there is a calm before the storm thing that happens, and to take cover because it will be a tornado touching down, despite that never happening here. So that was my first thought. Oh no, a tornado is about to happen, because everything just went dead silent. My kid is now curled up beside me, whimpering that he's scared. His ears hurt. Make it stop. And wants to go home. I swear to you, it felt like his little voice was the voice of God. That is how silent the place was. By now, the hair on my neck is standing up, and it is just a general sick feeling I'm getting, thinking a tornado is about to begin and suck us up. I actually started to feel afraid to look around me, and I focused on my kid and calming him down. At this point, the area had this ominous, heavy feeling. I can't explain that one either. Almost like I was afraid to look because I wouldn't like what I would see. Like when you're a kid and you are afraid to look under your bed at night or something. I know it sounds insane, and we had been there only for about 10 minutes or so when I just got myself semi-together and had a really strong, almost primal urge to get the hell out of there and down the trail. I picked up my still crying kid and literally ran the rest of the way. When we got there, my husband and other child were nowhere to be found. I mean, he had the keys, so we had to wait. At this point, it was only our car and two others still there. I assumed those two were on another, less easy trail, so I let the little one sit on the hood and prepared for the wait. At this point, I was still feeling leftover heebie-jeebies from the creepy quiet where we rested off that trail, but my kid was no longer complaining about his ears or his head. A few seconds later, my oldest son comes racing down from the same trail that we have just come from, with a look of sheer panic on his face, before he turns his head and starts screaming that he's found his mum and his brother. He was followed by my husband not even a minute later. My other son had been visibly crying, and my husband immediately started screaming at us like, "Where the hell have you been?" and if we're okay. I asked him what his issue was, told him that I sent him a text saying that we were resting for a little while off the edge of the trail. Now, here is what made my blood run cold. He told me that they had been looking for us for over 3 hours. I called him a liar, that it probably just felt like hours. I said we were resting for 10 minutes, tops. But after checking my phone, his phone, and even the clock in the car, it turned out that we really had been gone for about 3.5 hours. Besides this, my husband and other child said that they went up and down the paved trail to the viewing deck 3 or 4 times, while calling mine and my little son's name. This would have been impossible to miss because sound carries to an extreme level in that area. You could yell and it would be heard a mile away. I promptly turned and asked my little son if he still needed his migraine medicine, and he said that the noise making his head hurt was gone and that he was fine now. My husband asked him what noise, and he said it sounded like a big bumblebee inside his head. We hauled out of there as fast as we could, all the while with my explaining every detail to my husband, who basically told me to shut up until we got home and could talk away from the kids. Needless to say, we haven't been back to that area again, and my husband is no longer a fan of the woods like he used to be, either. First things first, this happened to me when I was around 10. I've lived in Idaho all my life and spent a lot of time outside or in the wilderness as a kid. My grandparents would take me camping, and my older brother and I would always hike up whatever trails we could find to get a view of the sunset. On one of these occasions, something terrifying happened. We were up at a campsite I only know as Warm River. It's called that because the river there never freezes over. And my brother and I were on a regular evening hike. There was an old tunnel bored through the mountain at one point of the trail, probably an old train tunnel, and we were walking through it when I heard something I'll never forget. After walking through probably 2/3 of the way, all the way through the tunnel, I heard a terrible screech at the end we entered through. The screech wasn't like anything I've heard before. I've heard the screams of animals on dark and windy nights. I even think I've heard Bigfoot calls a few times, but never the metallic, grinding screech I heard that day. The point is, whatever that sound was, it did not sound natural in any capacity. I probably jumped 5 feet in the air when I heard it, and my brother shouted a few choice curse words before shooing me quickly to the exit to the tunnel. At this point, my brother decided we should just continue walking and head back after whatever made that noise hopefully cleared out. We didn't have any firearms on us, so I was pretty upset. My brother reassured me that we would be fine, and we made the walk back without incident. However, I didn't get any sleep that night, whether it was the thing that screeched at us or just my imagination running wild. I heard things moving around the campsite the whole night, as well as whispers echoing through the darkness outside the trailer. I woke my brother up a few times to check out what it was, but he refused each time, telling me that it was probably just other campers staying up late and enjoying themselves. The rest of the trip was pretty normal. We packed up the following day, and my life continued as normal. I was disconcerted, but chalked whatever happened up there as a harmless event that I must have been exaggerating in my mind. A few weeks later, I went up to Pine Basin, an old ski lodge my family rented each year for family reunions. Here, I would mess around with my cousins. Our favourite activities would be night games. We would play hide and seek, a game called Ghosts in the Graveyard, and other games like that. On one instance, I was chosen to be the seeker for a hide and seek game because I was one of the younger cousins, so I got a flashlight as an advantage. Normally, all the younger cousins that hid chose close to the lodge, as the older cousins hid in the nearby trees or at the base of the nearby mountain. So as I was searching near the bottom of the mountain, I heard a familiar whistle up the mountain a bit. We would always whistle as a hint at our location. It sounded like someone was hiding way up near a tree known as the underwear tree. You can guess why. So I began trekking up towards the whistle. Now, as I climbed closer, I got an uneasy feeling in my stomach. So I continued on warily and convinced myself that I would be fine. I hated walking in the night alone, but figured whoever I found would walk me back to the lodge. As I neared the tree, I noticed that it was deathly silent. This alerted me that something was very wrong, because you could always hear the adults having fun back at the lodge. I was very anxious to hurry back, so I called out, "I found you, Scott." I thought the whistle was my older cousin's. "Come back down with me." I got no reply, but I wasn't planning on waiting. As I began walking down the path, I heard a voice call, "You almost had me." So I ran back up to investigate. I flashed my light into the branches of the tree and saw a monstrosity that was not my cousin. It looked like a poorly drawn stick figure made into a human with its emaciated figure and lifeless eyes. I remember its face looked like the skin on its head was being pulled from behind. It had torn and stretched features. As soon as I saw the creature, I screamed, dropped the flashlight, and ran back to the lodge. The entire time that I was running, I was overcome by an overpowering smell, and I could hear the thing running after me. As I approached the camp, I saw a few people, my cousins, that was at the bottom of the mountain waiting for me. I was crying and shaking, and they took me inside. I told my dad what happened, but my cousins all said they didn't see anything. The adults kept us inside for the night, and I kept hearing sounds drifting in from the mountains. I never played night games after that, and was always terrified that my cousins wouldn't listen to my warnings. Ever since that night, I have always felt uneasy up in those mountains. I used to be really religious and figured it was just a demon of some kind trying to kill me or something like that. But those mountains have never felt the same after that incident. So a few years ago, the game Until Dawn became really popular, and I watched a walkthrough of it on YouTube. When the Wendigo first appeared in the game, I got chills up and down my spine. It was exactly what I saw, and I did a ton of research on them. I figure someone must have gotten snowed in at that old lodge and resorted to cannibalism, but that doesn't explain what happened at Warm River. I still hear that screech from time to time, and it scares the hell out of me every single time. The following story happened to one of my closest friends. It was told to me the next morning as he sat very upset and scared in his kitchen. This affected me deeply, as this friend is one of the most fearless and capable people I have ever met. Just to show you how calm and unexcited he is, I will share one incident from his past. While sleeping in the back of his pickup truck one night in a very remote part of the southeast Idaho desert, he told me that he was startled out of a deep sleep by the uneasy feeling of being watched. Upon opening his eyes, he was surprised to see a grey, hairy man-like face leaning over the side of the pickup bed, watching him sleep. He quickly sat upright, startling the creature, which he watched bound away in the moonlight through the sagebrush and lava rock. When he told me this, I asked, "What did you do?" And he answered, "I went back to sleep. I was tired." As I said, not very excitable. So when I saw him that morning in his kitchen, scared and shaken, it affected me deeply. Here is what happened. My friend and I had just moved to Portland, Oregon after college. One day he asked me if he could borrow my .357 Magnum to take on a deer archery hunt he was planning the next weekend. He didn't think he would need to use it, but was concerned about the large bear population where he would be hunting. I loaned it to him. He arrived at the hunting site deep in the woods at the end of a logging road around twilight. Wanting to start hunting first thing the next morning, he rode his mountain bike in the dark to where he had hung his stand to spread some scent and make sure his shooting lanes were still open, etc. As he was crouched down, dribbling dough in the heat urine on a bush, he felt the presence of something behind him. He stood and turned, reaching for the only light he had brought with him, one of those little keyring LED lights that turn on when you squeeze it. He squeezed the light on, and saw a pretty large set of eyes about 3 feet off the ground reflect back at him. The LED light was too weak to show anything else, just the reflection of those eyes. Thinking it was normal that a bear or a deer would mistake him for an animal, after all he was crouched down, and he smelled like deer urine, he stood up straight, clapped his hands, and said, "Get out of here!" in a firm voice, expecting that the confused animal will bolt away when it realised he was human. His actions did not bring the expected result. Instead of turning and running away, the eyes slowly rose to over 9 feet tall and took a step towards him. He felt an overwhelming sense of dread and quickly pulled up the .357 out of the holster. Holding the revolver in one hand and the squeeze LED light in the other, he backed away from the eyes. Every step he took backwards, the eyes matched by advancing towards him, but always staying just out of the ring of the light emitted by the keyring. In a short time he was backed up against a large tree, which he used to protect his back, while he watched the eyes observe him from 10 feet away. The eyes would weave back and forth like a large animal adjusting his weight from side to side. They would rise and lower slightly, like something was studying him from different angles. Even though he never could actually see the animal, he had the sense of something huge, the way it moved, the sound of the leaves and dander under his feet as it walked, the impressive amount of air that were inhaled and exhaled as it breathed, and most of all, the height of the eyes as they towered over him indicated a creature of massive proportions. After an eternity, he lost sight of the eyes, but he could hear the animal circling his position. More than an hour had passed since the last noise or sighting of the eyes. My friend, sitting with his back against the tree and a cocked .357 in his hand, decided it would be safe to leave the area. It was now around 1 o'clock in the morning. He started walking to where he left his mountain bike. To his dismay, he heard the animal paralleling him in the thick brush. The beast followed him to his bike. Not wanting to lose his sense of hearing, his only warning of the animal's position, he chose to push his bike back to the truck instead of riding it. It took him over 4 hours to push the bike back to his camp. When he thought the animal was too close, judging by the sounds it made in the underbrush, he would just stop and wait. Every time he stopped, the animal would inevitably start circling him again. When it sounded like its circuitous route took it a little farther away, my friend would start pushing his bicycle again, only to repeat the same routine every 10 minutes or so throughout the torturous night. Finally, after a lifetime, he reached his vehicle, and in an adrenaline and panic-induced sprint, he threw his bike into the back, started the truck, and was headed down the mountain. It took several miles before the heavy sense of doom started to recede. As the adrenaline wore off, the shakes started. He started shaking so bad that it was all he could do to keep his truck on the road until he pulled up to his house into a kitchen chair. That is where I found him. A while later, when I went over to his house to feed and water his dog. After he told me what had happened to him, I offered to go back with him and retrieve his camping gear and tree stand. He refused the offer and left his possessions to nature rather than return to the area. Even though he hunts and fishes as avidly as ever, he will never go back to that spot and avoids the entire region passionately. It has been a couple of years now, but my friend Jack and I used to really enjoy camping and hiking in the state forest in upstate New York, behind the home that he grew up in. It was a massive forest with a large pond in the middle. I don't know exactly how large, but you could walk for miles in any direction and not get anywhere. A large part of the forest was flat, but the further in you went, the more elevated it became, until you were hiking some pretty steep elevation. We were there midsummer. One day we planned on spending the whole day out in the woods. We packed bags with lunches and snacks, equipment to start a campfire. We very rarely did it, but always brought it just in case. And we each had knives. We walked a couple of miles out to the hilly part of the forest. Now, at a flat clearing at the bottom of a very steep hill, we sat on a fallen tree and ate our lunches, talked for a little while, then decided we were ready to get up and moving. That's when we looked up the hill to start climbing. There was a massive, maybe 7 to 8 feet tall, brown humanoid figure staring at us. It was holding something shiny in its right hand, I'm not sure what. When we saw the figure, it darted away fast, like we both saw it for a second, and it immediately became a blur and was gone. I thought I was going crazy. I looked at Jack and he looked at me. We both asked, "Did you see that?" And he described generally the same thing to each other. The weird thing is, neither of us could describe exactly what it looked like. As soon as we saw it, it blurred away. But even for the split second we did see it, it was almost like the creature was out of focus, while the rest of the forest remained in focus. All we could say, which was the same for both of us, was it was tall, brown, carrying something shiny, and darted away in a fast blur. That day we decided it would be best to turn around and head home. However, a week or so later we decided to go back. We climbed the hill, and at the top of the hill we saw no tracks or sign of movement, though it had been about a week. A couple of minutes walking still, and we came across this run-down shed in the middle of the woods. Nothing around it for a mile. It was made of rotting wood, it had no windows, and the roof and one side of the walls had collapsed. We tried looking inside, but didn't see much except for a few old tools. We stayed in the area for a few hours and saw nothing else of note. Not sure if that last part is even relevant, but maybe it is. I mean, has anyone ever seen anything like this? Jack and I always referred to it as Bigfoot, but we're not 100% sure that is what it was. Thank you so much for listening, guys. Really appreciate it. If you stay to the end, please like, comment and subscribe. It's only my second video. I am new. Hopefully getting a bit better. So thank you very much.